H2, The World Between Worlds. The champagne flutes clinked like tiny bells across the grand ballroom of the Oceanic Institute. Eleanor Wright adjusted her simple navy dress, a thrift store find she'd splurged on for this event, and took a deep breath. The annual Pacific Conservation Gala sparkled with wealth that made her feel like an interloper. As the head marine biologist at a struggling research center in Monterey, she was here for one purpose: to speak about the declining coral populations and hopefully secure funding. Dr. Wright. A coordinator approached with a tablet. You're speaking in 20 minutes. Will you need anything for your presentation? Eleanor shook her head, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. Just working microphones and functioning slideshow equipment. The dying reefs speak for themselves. Across the room, surrounded by a small entourage, stood Vincent Thorne. At 38, he had transformed Thorne Technologies from a startup to a global empire worth billions. His custom-tailored suit matched the steel in his eyes, calculating, distant. Those who didn't know better might think he was merely observing the crowd. Those who did know better understood he was assessing everything like data points. Another conservation gala, another tax write-off, murmured Dominic, his CFO, scrolling through his phone. Though I must say, the marine science sector offers interesting investment opportunities. Vincent nodded absently, his attention caught by a woman studying the massive aquarium wall. Unlike the others, who posed for photos beside it, she was focused on the intricate coral formation, her fingers hovering near the glass, as if counting something. Who's that? Vincent asked. Dominic glanced up. Eleanor Wright, marine biologist, specializes in coral restoration. Brilliant mind. No business sense. Her research center is practically bankrupt despite groundbreaking work. Vincent raised an eyebrow. Yet she doesn't approach me directly like the others. Perhaps because she actually cares about the ocean more than money. Dominic replied with a rare hint of respect. As Eleanor finished examining the tank, she turned and accidentally collided with a waiter. The tray tipped, sending a glass of water, arcing through the air, directly onto Vincent Thorne's immaculate suit jacket. Oh God, I'm so sorry. Eleanor grabbed napkins from a nearby table, horrified as she recognized the man she'd doused. Vincent's entourage stepped forward protectively, but he raised a hand to stop them. It's fine, he said coldly. Just water. Eleanor blotted at his jacket, mortified. That suit probably costs more than my annual research budget. Said, 40,000, actually, he replied without emotion. Eleanor stepped back, her embarrassment turning to something else. $40,000 for something that can't withstand water seems impractical for an evening dedicated to ocean conservation. The silence that followed was deafening. Vincent's associates looked shocked at her candor, but a flicker of something, surprise, perhaps, crossed Vincent's face. Most people would be apologizing profusely right now, he observed. I did apologize, Eleanor replied. But you're just a person who got wet. The coral reefs I'm trying to save are dying, and no one's apologizing to them. Vincent studied her, his practiced mask of indifference momentarily slipping. You're speaking tonight? Yes. About how we're losing coral ecosystems faster than we can document them. Though I suspect most here care more about the financial impact than the ecological one. And you don't think financial concerns matter? Eleanor sighed. Of course they matter. But when I'm underwater watching a 100-year-old coral colony die in a week, dollar signs seem rather abstract. Before Vincent could respond, Eleanor was called away for her presentation. As she walked toward the stage, Vincent found himself strangely affected. People had been telling him what he wanted to hear for so long that her directness felt like a splash of cold water, perhaps more refreshing than the actual water on his jacket. Eleanor took the podium, her voice transforming as she spoke about the ocean's wonders. Her passion was evident in every word, every gesture. The audience of wealthy donors and corporate representatives listened with varying degrees of interest. But Vincent found himself leaning forward, genuinely captivated. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about acquisitions or market share. He was thinking about the woman who saw past his billions to speak to him like a human being, and about the dying underwater world she was fighting to save. Tides of truth. Eleanor's presentation ended to polite applause, but she could tell from the faces in the crowd that her urgent message about coral bleaching had failed to truly move them. As people dispersed toward the open bar, she collected her notes and stepped off the small stage, wondering if her cross-country flight had been worth the carbon footprint. "That was quite illuminating," said a voice behind her. She turned to find Vincent Thorne, his jacket now dry, but still bearing a faint water stain. He stood with casual confidence, hands in his pockets. "Mr. Thorne," Eleanor acknowledged with a nod. "I'm surprised you stayed for the whole presentation after our introduction." "Your passion is compelling," he replied, "though I notice you didn't include any investment opportunities or corporate partnerships in your speech." Eleanor smiled thinly. "That's because I'm a scientist, not a salesperson. The reefs don't care about quarterly earnings." Vincent studied her with newfound interest. "Walk with me," he said, gesturing toward the Institute's outdoor terrace. It wasn't a question, but Eleanor followed, intrigued despite herself. The night air carried the salt tang of the Pacific. Below the terrace, waves crashed against the cliffs, their rhythm a counterpoint to the string quartet playing inside. "Your research center is facing financial collapse," Vincent stated matter-of-factly. 3 grants denied, equipment failing, and staff taking voluntary pay cuts. Eleanor stiffened. "You've been investigating me." "I investigate everything that interests me." He leaned against the railing. "I could solve your funding problems with a single transfer." "And what would you want in return? Naming rights? Corporate greenwashing for Thorne Technologies?" Vincent's expression remained unreadable. "Perhaps I simply find your work valuable." Per parentheses. "Nothing is simple with billionaires," Eleanor countered. "In my experience, money always comes with strings attached." B. You have experience with billionaires? "I have worked with enough wealthy donors to know the pattern. They want control, recognition, or absolution for environmental sins." Vincent turned to face the ocean, his profile sharp against the moonlight. "You judge me without knowing me, B. I know your company's environmental record," Eleanor replied. "Thorne Technologies' manufacturing plants in Southeast Asia have contributed significantly to coastal pollution." Vincent's jaw tightened. "Those factories employ thousands and follow local regulations." "Regulations you help write through lobbying," Eleanor said quietly. "The ocean doesn't recognize legal loopholes, Mr. Thorne." They stood in tense silence, the waves below the only sound between them. Finally, Vincent spoke. "When I was 12, my parents died in a boating accident off the coast of Maine. I was with them." His voice remained even, but Eleanor sensed the effort it took. "I survived 3 days drifting, clinging to a piece of the hull. The ocean took my family, but spared me." Eleanor hadn't expected this vulnerability. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I'm telling you because you should understand something. I respect the ocean more than you think. It's not a resource to exploit. It's a force to be reckoned with. Then why allow your company to harm it?" "Because business is complex, Dr. Wright. Change doesn't happen overnight." Eleanor turned to him, her eyes reflecting the determination that had carried her through years of underfunded research. "But it does happen. Sometimes it just needs a catalyst." Vincent regarded her thoughtfully. Is that what you are? A catalyst? I'm just a scientist trying to save what matters before it's gone. The evening breeze stirred Eleanor's hair, and for a moment, Vincent saw something in her that reminded him of the ocean itself. Beautiful, principled, and unyielding. Your presentation mentioned a restoration technique, he said, changing direction. Using 3D printed coral structures to seed new growth. Eleanor nodded, surprised by his attention to detail. It's promising, but scaling it requires resources we don't have. What if you did have those resources? Vincent asked. No strings, no corporate branding, just funding for your work. Eleanor's brow furrowed in suspicion. Why would you do that? Perhaps because for the first time in years, someone looked at me and didn't see a dollar sign, he replied. You challenged me. That's rare in my world. Before Eleanor could respond, Vincent's assistant approached, murmuring about an urgent call from Tokyo. Vincent nodded and turned back to Eleanor. I'd like to see your research center, he said. Not as a potential investor, just as someone who wants to understand your work. Eleanor hesitated, torn between skepticism and the desperate need for support her center faced. Our facility isn't impressive, it's all function, no luxury. Good, Vincent replied. I have enough luxury in my life. He handed her a business card with his private contact information. Think about it. No pressure, no expectations. As he walked away, Eleanor felt oddly unbalanced, as if the tide had shifted beneath her feet. She'd come to this gala hoping to find funding for her research, but instead had found something more perplexing. A billionaire who might actually be a person worth knowing. Back in her hotel room that night, Eleanor researched Vincent Thorne beyond the headlines. She discovered a man who had built his empire from nothing after tragedy, a brilliant mind who rarely gave interviews, and a philanthropist whose donations were substantial but always anonymous. Perhaps there was more to him than corporate spreadsheets and billion-dollar acquisitions. Meanwhile, in his penthouse suite across town, Vincent found himself doing something he hadn't done in years, reconsidering his approach. Eleanor Wright had spoken to him not as Vincent Thorne, the billionaire, but as a man capable of making different choices. It was refreshing, challenging, and strangely exhilarating. For the first time, in longer than he could remember, Vincent fell asleep thinking not about market shares or board meetings, but about coral reefs, and the woman who had dedicated her life to saving them. He noticed Eleanor waiting by the entrance. Her hair was tied back in a practical ponytail, and she wore a faded research center sweatshirt with jeans. You actually came, she said, surprise evident in her voice. I half expected a last-minute cancellation. Vincent glanced around at the facility. I said I wanted to see your work. I meant it. Eleanor studied him for a moment, then nodded. Well, welcome to the real world of marine conservation. No champagne, no hors d'oeuvres, just science and salt water. She led him through the front doors, into a building humming with activity. Graduate students huddled over microscopes. Technicians monitored water quality in large tanks, and the walls were covered with charts, graphs, and underwater photographs. This is our main lab, Eleanor explained, gesturing to the space. We are running 17 different research projects, with a staff that should be twice this size. Vincent observed everything with keen interest. Your equipment looks ancient? Eleanor finished with a wry smile. Our mass spectrometer is held together with marine-grade duct tape and prayers. As they toured the facility, Vincent remained uncharacteristically quiet, absorbing every detail. Eleanor showed him their coral nurseries, tanks filled with fragments of living coral being carefully cultivated for eventual ocean transplantation. Each of these colonies represents years of growth, she explained,
pointing to a vibrant cluster of orange coral. In the wild, they'd take decades to reach this size, but we've accelerated their growth using specialized conditions. How many survive when transplanted back to the ocean? Vincent asked. About 60% in optimal conditions, Eleanor replied. The challenge isn't just growing them. It's creating reef environments that can withstand warming waters and increasing acidity. She led him to a specialized lab where 3D printers were creating intricate calcium carbonate structures. This is the project I mentioned at the Gala. We designed substrate structures that mimic natural reef formations, then seed them with coral polyps.
The structures provide immediate habitat for marine life,
while the living coral establishes itself.
Vincent knelt to examine one of the completed structures. The computational modeling for these must be complex.
It is, Eleanor confirmed.
We're using outdated software because we can't afford the license fees for the latest versions.
As the tour continued,
Vincent noticed how the staff interacted with Eleanor. With genuine respect, rather than the deference tinged with fear he often observed in his own company. They shared jokes, asked questions freely, and clearly valued her leadership. Eventually, they reached a small dock extending into the bay. A research vessel bobbed gently in the water. Its paint faded, but the equipment on deck well maintained.
The horizon, Eleanor said, with evident affection.
She's not much to look at, but she gets us where we need to go. You speak about your boat the way most people talk about beloved pets, Vincent observed.
Eleanor laughed.
When you depend on something to keep you alive in rough seas, you develop a relationship with it. She paused, studying him. Would you like to see what we actually do out there?
Vincent hesitated. You mean go into the water?
Unless you're afraid of getting wet, she challenged, a hint of mischief in her eyes. An hour later, Vincent found himself in a wetsuit, following Eleanor through the crystal waters of a protected cove. It had been years since he'd gone diving, not since before his parents' accident, and the initial moments underwater brought back painful memories. But as Eleanor guided him toward a test restoration site, those memories receded. The underwater world unfolded around him in vibrant color and motion. Fish darted through the experimental reef structures they'd placed months earlier, now showing promising signs of coral growth. Eleanor pointed out details, her gestures eloquent in the wordless underwater environment. Through their dive computers, she explained how the different structures were performing, which coral species were thriving, and how the entire miniature ecosystem was developing. When they finally surfaced, Vincent felt changed in a way he couldn't immediately articulate. That was, he began, searching for words. Different from board meetings? Eleanor suggested as they waded toward shore. Profound, Vincent corrected. You're not just studying this world, you're actively rebuilding it. Back at the research center, they sat on the dock with towels around their shoulders, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. Your work matters, Vincent said simply. More than quarterly reports or stock prices. Eleanor looked at him with newfound appreciation. You surprised me today. Most people in your position would have stayed safely on the boat, observing from a distance. Most people in my position forget what it's like to experience wonder, Vincent admitted. I built my company to create technological innovation, but somewhere along the way, the purpose got lost in the profit. It's not too late to find that purpose again, Eleanor said quietly. Vincent turned to her, seeing not just a brilliant scientist, but a woman whose integrity and passion had somehow breached the careful walls he'd built around himself. I want to help your work, Eleanor. Not as a tax write-off or PR move, but because it deserves to exist. And what do you want in return? She asked, the wariness not entirely gone from her voice. A chance to remember what it's like to make something that matters. He replied honestly. As the sun touched the water, casting golden light across the bay, Eleanor realized she was seeing Vincent Thorne, not the billionaire, but the man who had survived tragedy and built an empire to fill the void it left. A man who, perhaps, was ready to discover what else might fill that space. "We can start with new equipment," she said finally, "and maybe fixing the roof before the next rainy season." Vincent smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his usually serious face. "I think we can manage that." What neither of them said, as they watched the sunset paint the water with fire, was that something fundamental had shifted between them, a connection forming as naturally and inevitably as the tide. H2. Storms and Sanctuaries. 3 months passed in a whirlwind of transformation. The Monterey Marine Research Center hummed with renewed energy. New equipment filled the laboratories. The leaky roof had been replaced, and the staff had grown with the addition of 4 specialized researchers Eleanor had previously only dreamed of hiring. All courtesy of Vincent Thorne, who had become a regular presence at the facility. He'd established a dedicated environmental division within Thorne Technologies, with Eleanor as a consulting scientific director. Their partnership had evolved into something neither had anticipated, a deep friendship built on mutual respect and shared purpose. But on this particular morning, as Eleanor hurried through the center's corridors, her face was tight with worry. "The forecast looks worse," she told Vincent, who was reviewing designs for a new coral restoration technology with one of her engineers. "Hurricane Felix has strengthened to Category 4 and shifted course. It's heading directly for our primary research site in the Florida Keys." Vincent immediately set aside the designs. "When will it make landfall?" 36 hours. We have transplanted coral colonies that won't survive those conditions without protection." Her voice remained professional, but Vincent had learned to recognize the subtle signs of her distress, the tension in her shoulders, the slight furrow between her brows. "What do you need?" he asked simply. Eleanor hesitated. "It's not just equipment we need. I have to go there myself. Those colonies represent 5 years of research." "I'm coming with you," Vincent said without hesitation. 6 hours later, they were on his private jet heading to Florida, accompanied by a small team of Eleanor's most experienced researchers. Vincent had mobilized resources with the efficiency that had built his empire, arranging emergency permits, securing specialized equipment, and coordinating with local authorities. As the plane cut through the night sky, Eleanor studied the latest data on her tablet. Vincent watched her, the determination in her profile, the way she absently tucked her hair behind her ear when concentrating. He had grown accustomed to these details, finding in them a comfort he hadn't expected. "You've changed since the gala." "You changed me," he admitted quietly. The moment hung between them, laden with unspoken feelings, until turbulence jolted the plane and brought their focus back to the crisis at hand. They landed in Key West as dawn broke, the air heavy with impending storm. The next 24 hours became a race against time, diving to secure protective structures over the vulnerable coral colonies, reinforcing research equipment, and evacuating what they could to safer locations. Vincent worked alongside Eleanor's team, following her instructions, hauling equipment, and diving despite the increasingly dangerous conditions. His technical expertise proved invaluable, as they deployed experimental protective domes over the most critical coral sites. As the outer bands of Hurricane Felix began to lash the Keys, they made their final dive. Underwater, the approaching storm manifested as unusual currents and decreasing visibility. Vincent stayed close to Eleanor as they secured the last protective dome, their movements in perfect synchronization after months of working together. When they surfaced, the sky had darkened ominously. Wind whipped the waves into whitecaps, and their research vessel, pitched precariously. "That's all we can do," Eleanor shouted over the wind as they climbed aboard. "We need to evacuate now." But nature had other plans. As they headed for shore, the storm intensified faster than predicted. Massive waves crashed over the bow, and the engine sputtered ominously. "We're losing power," called the captain. Vincent moved instantly to the engine compartment, his years of engineering experience kicking in. Eleanor followed, helping him assess the damage. "Salt water in the fuel line," Vincent determined. "We can reroute through the secondary system, but I need tools." They worked together in the cramped pitching space, hands brushing as they passed tools back and forth. When the engine finally roared back to life, Eleanor's relief was palpable, but short-lived. A massive wave struck the vessel broadside, sending equipment crashing across the deck. Vincent lunged to secure a tank, but another wave hit, knocking him against the railing. For a terrifying moment, he teetered on the edge, the angry sea reaching for him. Eleanor grabbed him, her grip fierce and unwavering. "I've got you," she said, pulling him back to safety. In that moment, with rain lashing their faces and the world churning around them, something crystallized between them. A recognition that their connection had deepened into something neither had been seeking, but both had found. They made it to shore as the full fury of Hurricane Felix descended. Taking shelter in a reinforced research building, they monitored their protective structures remotely through the storm's peak. Huddled around screens in the emergency lighting, they watched anxiously as data streamed in from sensors. "The northern site is holding," Eleanor reported, relief evident in her voice. "The new domes are working." Vincent placed his hand over hers on the keyboard. "Your work is safe." Eleanor turned her hand to clasp his. "Our work," she corrected. In the dim light, with the storm raging outside, they found in each other the eye of their own personal hurricane, a place of unexpected calm and clarity. "I never expected you," Vincent said softly. "Nor I you," Eleanor replied. "But here we are." He smiled. "Here we are. Constellations of the heart." 1 year later, Eleanor stood at the bow of a newly christened research vessel, the Catalyst, watching the sunset paint the Pacific horizon. Behind her, the expanded Monterey Marine Research Center stood as a testament to what had been accomplished in 12 short months. The Thorne Foundation for Ocean Conservation, created by Vincent with Eleanor as its scientific director, had grown into one of the most respected environmental organizations in the world. Their innovative approach combining cutting-edge technology with rigorous science had pioneered new methods of coral restoration, with pilot programs now operating in 12 countries. Vincent appeared beside her, handing her a mug of tea. "The team from Australia just called. Their reef showing 90% survival rate after 6 months." Eleanor smiled, accepting the mug. "Remember when 60% felt like a miracle?" "You've redefined what's possible," Vincent said, leaning against the railing beside her. "We have," she corrected, bumping her shoulder against his, affectionately. Their relationship had evolved gradually, naturally, like Kirill building upon itself, year after year. What began as reluctant respect had grown into friendship, then partnership, and finally, love. One built not on fantasy or fortune, but on shared purpose and genuine understanding. Vincent's transformation had been profound. The corporate titan still existed. Thorne Technologies continued to thrive under his leadership. But he had reshaped its mission and practices. The company now led the tech industry in sustainability, with manufacturing processes reimagined to protect rather than harm the oceans. Eleanor, too, had changed. Her scientific brilliance now had the platform it deserved. Her voice amplified beyond academic journals to influence policy and practice worldwide. She remained hands-on in her research, but had embraced her unexpected role as an environmental leader. "I got another offer today," Vincent said casually. "Merger proposal from Westfield Tech." "And?" Eleanor asked, though she already knew the answer. "Turned it down. It would have meant compromising our environmental standards." He looked out at the horizon. "There was a time when I would have seen only the profit margin." Eleanor took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "And now?" "Now I see the bigger picture." He turned to face her fully. "You taught me that true value isn't measured in billions." The fading sunlight caught the simple band on Eleanor's left hand, a ring fashioned from recycled gold, set not with diamonds but with a small piece of lab-grown coral, cultivated from the colonies they'd saved during Hurricane Felix. Their wedding 3 months ago had been small and intimate, held on the beach near the research center, with the ocean as their witness. No society photographers, no corporate networking, just two people who had found in each other something authentic and enduring. "I've been thinking about expanding our programs to Indonesia," Eleanor said. "Their reefs are in critical danger, but with the right approach." Vincent smiled, recognizing the familiar spark of passion in her eyes. "You never stop, do you?" "Neither do you," she countered with a knowing look. "I saw the new designs for the floating research platforms." He laughed. Guilty as charged. As darkness fell, stars began to appear above them. Pinpoints of light in the vast cosmos, forming patterns that had guided sailors for millennia. "When I was at that gala a year ago," Eleanor said softly, "the last thing I expected was to find someone who would change everything." "I thought I had everything figured out," Vincent admitted. "Success, wealth, power, but it was all just hollow. You showed me what really matters." Eleanor leaned against him, her head finding its familiar place on his shoulder. "Not bad for someone who spilled water on your $40,000 suit." Vincent's laughter mingled with the sound of waves against the hull. "Best thing that ever happened to me." Below the surface of the ocean they both loved, countless coral polyps continued their ancient work of building, growing, creating habitat for myriad forms of life. Like those tiny creatures, Vincent and Eleanor had built something lasting and vital, a partnership that enhanced not only their own lives but the world around them. Their love story wasn't one of fantasy or fate, but of two people who recognized in each other the capacity for growth, change, and genuine connection. Vincent Thorne had learned that his greatest asset wasn't his fortune, but his capacity to care, while Eleanor Wright had discovered that her dedication to saving the oceans had unexpectedly saved something in him and in herself. As the catalyst continued its course through the darkening waters, they stood together under the emerging constellations. Two people who had found in each other not an escape from reality, but a partner with whom to face it, change it, and make it better. In a world that often celebrated superficial connections and material success, they had discovered a profound truth, that the heart's true wealth lies not in what it possesses, but in what it gives. And in giving to each other and to the world they both cherished, they had found a love as deep and enduring as the ocean itself.